Celestial greetings. I'm Janet Booth, a professional astrologer from West Hartford, Connecticut, and welcome to my program on astrology called Looking Up. Do you know it's 18 years since I started doing this show? That'll make you feel old if you've been watching it all this time with me. Our topic today is Jupiter in Sagittarius. And Jupiter has a 12-year orbit around the zodiac. So lucky me, I was able to go back and find a flash drive of my files from 12 years ago. And so half of my work to get ready for today was already done. That's very fortuitous. And Jupiter is the planet about good fortune. You know, it's the biggest planet, and it has the most moons, the biggest storms, the biggest spots, well, except for maybe sunspots. But Jupiter has like a gravity field of its own. It's not quite like a center of its own solar system. Well, I guess it sort of is with all its moons. So, of course, being the biggest planet, it's related to bigness, expansion, growth. We usually think of those as good things, you know, forward progress. However, everything in life has its duality, or let's say maybe it's our brains that are wired to look for duality. I'm not sure, because we sure see it a lot. Maybe it's even cultural. I don't know. But, you know, as much as it can have a good side, Jupiter also, meaning growth, can be related to things growing out of control, or even things like tumors. They might be benign because Jupiter's supposed to be fortuitous, but they might not. And when I look at people's charts and I'm checking for things about health, sometimes I'll think, oh good, it's Jupiter that's being activated. But then I have to look a little further, because if Jupiter is in a good condition, playing nicely with the other planets, well then it's going to amplify that niceness. But if Jupiter's already in some trouble in one of those like T's or crosses that we talk about sometimes as being like confrontational or abrasive, then what you're going to get is an amplification of that. So bigger, not always better. Think of your belly too. Bigger, not necessarily better. Now, Jupiter does have to do with optimism. You know, is your glass half empty? Is the glass half full? It's always more than half full when Jupiter is in a good condition, or when Jupiter's sign that it rules, Sagittarius, is kind of nicely emphasized in a chart or in the moment. And Jupiter has to do with humor. It's all about laughter, and laughter is the best medicine, and looking at things in a sort of different perspective in a humorous way. It's also the planet about philosophy and being kind of philosophical, which even when we talk about is the glass half empty or half full, that's kind of a philosophical premise, isn't it? Now, there are many things that both the planet Jupiter and the sign that it rules, or has its strongest association and most natural expression in, which would be Sagittarius, they're both affiliated with several things. And if you're looking at an individual chart, whether that's of a person or a company or, you know, some other entity, anything that begins in a moment of time can have a chart. If you look at the area that's called the 9th house, which is sort of in the top part of the chart between what would be 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock on a clock face, and it would be in the southerly direction with a little bit west of south. That is the house that is the natural zodiac position for Sagittarius, and therefore also has an affinity with Jupiter. And all three of those can be associated with things like higher education. We find the lower education opposite that in the 3rd house, but higher education, reaching out and communicating at a distance. You know, communication in general, a 3rd house thing, but that would be even like local communication. So when it stretches out far and wide to the world, that is a 9th house Jupiter Sagittarius thing. And we have let's see, media, broadcast, Originally it would be publications, but now, you know, we've got, since the electronic age, radio, television, internet, all forms of that. I mean, I guess maybe first it was even telegraph. I learned how to do telegraph once. This is how old I am. Back when I was a secretary in my 20s, there weren't even fax machines yet, if you can imagine that. So technology has expanded giantly in the past couple of decades. So long distance travel is also related to ninth house Jupiter Sagittarius. And in that sense, it gives us the feeling of internationalism, globalism, and now we even do long distance travel off the planet. I will say this, that actual air travel and space travel are also kind of related to Uranus and Aquarius, but it's still ninth housey. Laws, legislature, another big topic. So anything that has to do with legal matters for an entity would be found in the ninth house, or could be also signified by Jupiter or Sagittarius. So those are some of our major areas that we're looking for as Jupiter spends its 1 year out of its 12-year orbit in its home sign. And it enters Sagittarius on the 8th of November, which is one reason why I'm doing November program on Sagittarius and Jupiter in Sagittarius. And it will be there just a pinch over a year until December 2nd of 2019. Now, what might that mean for you or for any of us? Well, when Jupiter travels through Sagittarius, it's a wonderful time for us to bring ourselves to new heights. We want to stretch, we want to grow, we want to be bigger than we were before. We want to take risks and do something new, learn something new. So it's a good time for furthering your education and also for travel if you're able to do that. And we usually have a desire for travel and higher education when we have Jupiter going through Sagittarius. Or you might find, if you look in your personal chart and you see whatever sign is in your ninth house, and it probably starts with one sign and then moves into the next sign. So when Jupiter goes through those signs, that might be your personal best time for higher education or for travel or for legal matters. But just in that sort of generic sense, it's a good time for all of us for legal matters. Perhaps a lot of legislation will get jammed through in the next year. Now, this is a time for you to benefit through contact at a distance. That doesn't have to be international. That could just be a little farther than your state. And this is also a time for the increased use of internet, long distance, Skype. Oh, everybody does FaceTime now. Probably all the social media things will, be kind of off the charts. And as I said before, there's always the plus side, then there's the minus side. So a minus side of Jupiter going through Sagittarius is kind of the same minus that we have with all of what we call the mutable signs. And these are the signs of Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. All of them like to adapt and bend with the wind, but any one of them is subject to a scattering of energy. Things being too spread out, not concentrated. And there's also, you may have heard this term, it's probably a really old-fashioned term that comes from blacksmith days, too many irons in the fire, which I imagine meaning, you wanted to have each, say, horseshoe heating up in the flames just to the right amount so that when you bang it out, it all works the way you want it to. And if you have too many irons in the fire, maybe some of them aren't going to get the right treatment that they need to get. I don't know exactly the origin of that, but I know we use it as meaning you got too much going on, too many balls in the air, you're trying to juggle too many things, handle too many things. So when we look on a more societal scale, we might find that our year of Jupiter going through Sagittarius will be beneficial for lawyers and judges, as well as professors, instructors, maybe even travel agents. There are not a lot of travel agents anymore. So we might take that to the idea of travel websites, and maybe we'll see some improvements or developments in booking your own travel. Now, when we also think of international and global matters, we look for more attention on international relations. Does this mean they improve? Maybe. We'll have to see. They've been pretty crazy lately. But I have to say Jupiter, which is the natural planet of international matters for this year of 2018, has been going through Scorpio. And Scorpio is a sign of extreme. So it's all one way or all another way. And it's also a sign of sort of breaking with the past or making a big change. So we've seen some of those for sure in 2018. But the idea of spaceship Earth that we all live on is the idea of a global village. And that's what we hope will become improved under Jupiter and Sagittarius. And international trade is certainly something that's receiving a lot of focus. Now, another big issue is immigration, refugees, extradition. All of those have to do with international relations and even the idea of migration from South America or Central America through Mexico up into America. That's very Jupiterian, and we'll probably see more paying attention to how to deal with that when we've got Jupiter in Sagittarius. So I've tried to think about what were some of the developments in recent cultural history, or let's say at least in the United States, because that's where I pay attention to, because that's where we live. Sorry if there's any international viewers tuning in on the internet. But going back 12 years was 2006 into 2007, and that is when there was, well, let's even roll it back another 12 years. And let's go back 24 years ago from 2018 was 1994. And after decades and decades of the Democrats being in charge of both houses of Congress, along came Newt Gingrich with his Contract for America, and there was a big tidal wave to the Republican side, and they took over both houses of Congress. And they held them for 12 years until 2006, when the Democrats came in and took back. And since then, there's sort of been a back and forth between them, and sometimes, I don't know if we had mixed. Anyway, when you used to have a president of one party and a legislature controlled by the other party, they had to compromise and work together. But when we had that 06 switch, and then Obama won in 08, he went into his first 2 years in office with both houses of Congress and got a lot of big changes done. And then what we've seen now in 2017 and 18 is the sort of backlash reaction to that. So I'm taping this in October. It's before the election. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but if 24 years ago and 12 years ago is any hint, then what we've got is 2018 should be, again, a swing into which party is in charge of Congress. Now, on a lighter note, since remember, it's not only about legislation, but Jupiter in Sagittarius is wonderful for comedy. And I am a big fan of comedy. And when I was reading recently a kind of rundown of top 10 television programs that are popular with Republicans versus the top 10 that are popular with Democrats, there was one show that was in common to both lists, or maybe it was one sitcom that was in common. And it started during Jupiter in Sagittarius in 2007, and that was Big Bang Theory. So everybody loves the Big Bang Theory, and even if you think the Republicans aren't paying attention a lot to scientists, they like to laugh at them at least. So we all get a good laugh out of Big Bang Theory. And you know, I find if I'm having a hard day and I really need to lift my spirits, all I have to do is put on one episode of Big Bang. I don't care if it's an old episode, and that'll just make me feel better for the rest of the day. So I like to apply humor, like laughter is the best medicine, in a medicinal way. So now we're going to take a little cruise around the circle and let you know by according to your sign, whether we look at your sun sign, if you don't know what's called your rising sign, or if you know your rising sign, listen up for that. But do remember that you might be affected by two signs, well, maybe more than two, your rising sign and your sun sign, but that signs sometimes straddle houses. So what I'm looking at here is if we put the sign in question at the first house and then go around the circle to the 9th house, and that's where we would have the Jupiter and Sagittarius influence. Yes. Well, I'm going to put all the different signs at the first, and it'll be different houses that have the emphasis. So Aries is the start of the regular sign pattern. So if you are an Aries or you have an Aries rising sign, then for you, the Jupiter and Sagittarius lines up with the natural 9th house power place for Jupiter and Sagittarius. So you'll be having a great year for the legal matters, using the media. I usually think promotion is related to the 9th house, and it's a travel or a higher education year for you, for sure. Now, when we put Taurus at the first house and count around and look for Sagittarius, we're going to find that that lines up with the 8th house, and that's the area of credit, insurance, taxes, shared money matters, inheritance, life and death matters, maybe looking into the mysteries of life. It's kind of the house of death, but also birth, procreation. Maybe some Tauruses are going to be, lucky having a conception this year if they've been having difficulty with that. And it's sort of the area of, the other side, or looking into matters not in the earthly kind of way. Now, if Gemini is the sign at your rising or your sun sign, this would be a 7th house year for you with the Sagittarius over there having Jupiter go through. And that's the house of marriage, one-to-one relationships, networking, and also competition and your open enemies. So any of those areas could be very important for the Gemini sun or rising sign in 2019. If Leo is your rising or sun sign, the Sagittarius area for you is the 5th house. That is Leo's home house, or where it's naturally affiliated with. So that should be a very good year for Leo. And that would mean that creative projects are expanding, or your interaction with children is especially satisfactory or fun, or when you talk about hobbies, maybe for a hobby, if you've been wanting to do something with comedy, go take a comedy class. Do you know that at the Playhouse on Park Road here in West Hartford, they have acting classes for adults and children. They also have improv comedy classes and great improv shows and stand-up shows too. So I encourage you to look into that. This is also an area of recreation, just downtime, fun. I call it the fun house. So be like a kid, mess around, play. It's also the area of speculation, and I will say that Leos, maybe more than many signs, enjoy gambling or taking a risk. So it's a big risk-taking year for the Leos. For Virgo, sun sign or rising sign, this would be in the 4th house where you would have Sagittarius. And that's the area of home and family, kind of what's under your own roof, any property matters, or can just be your residence even if you don't own property. And it could be property you own even if you don't live there. It's all about family relations, and kind of that's the foundation of the chart. So you're looking to see how can you increase your foundation, or many people will want to have a sense of more space in their house. Well, if you can't actually expand or move to someplace bigger, maybe you can have a bigger feeling by putting up a mirror and reflecting into a room, or getting rid of some stuff and being more minimalist. You know, the problem with Jupiter is it tends to go overboard, or too much of a good thing. So it's very easy to have too much in your house. If you are Libra or Libra rising, the third house is the area of Sagittarius for you. And this is your local environment, your neighborhood, your community, even the people just on your street or next door to you. So maybe you get along better with them, or guess what? Jupiter, if there's a problem, it amplifies it. So if you've been having a little, border war with your neighbor, not so good. Okay, it's the house of siblings, so you might have a lot more interaction with your sisters and your brothers. And it's also the area I mentioned before about the lower education. So you might be more involved with something that's going on in grade schools. Or geez, it's our old chums from our grade schools and neighborhoods growing up. Maybe you'll hear from the boy next door or the girl next door. If Scorpio is your sun or rising sign, it's an area about your assets, the second house, self-worth, net worth. So how good do you feel about yourself? Should be better and better. And it's possibly a time for financial partnering, because Scorpio likes to have joint money matters anyway. And your investments should probably do pretty well for you in 2019, Scorpios. You'd be happy to hear that. Now, if you are Sagittarius, sun sign or rising sign, this is a first house year for you. That's the year of your body and paying attention to what's going on with it. And you probably hope not to put on weight. So maybe what you need to do is pick up the weights and build muscle mass, which burns fat, which helps you keep from gaining weight when Jupiter's in your first house. It's a time for personal growth and an increase in confidence. And maybe you get a little more personal attention and glory. If Capricorn is your sun sign or rising sign, this is the 12th house position for Sagittarius. Or let's say Sagittarius is the sign of your 12th house. That's the area of divinity. So perhaps your relationship with however you call the Great Spirit will improve, or you have more of an interest in spiritual matters. It's a place of R&R, retreat, rest, and it might be a seclusion time when you want to have more privacy or personal space. If Capricorn, we just said that, Capricorn. If Aquarius is your rising or sun sign, this would be 11th house where Sagittarius is, and that's the natural house for Aquarius. So we're finding Aquarius and Leo have pretty good years here with the Sagittarius emphasis. That's the area of friendship, groups, associations, the circles that you travel in. It's also our hopes and wishes. So you might work on your big wish list or bucket list, do some of those things. And it's the second house from the 10th. The 10th can be your business. And if you have a business, second house matters or money or income. So it's the income from your business. So that should be good for business people, the owners. And if Pisces is your sun sign or rising sign, the 10th house is where Sagittarius would be in your chart. And that's the area of your reputation. Hopefully it increases and gets better instead of people finding out your secrets. But guess what? Jupiter, it's an out in the open planet, and Sag is an out in the open sign. So things are going to be out in the open. And if that increases your reputation, great. And if it doesn't, too bad. Okay, that's the area of your career or calling, and you may find that you have a very good year in your career. And if you're retired, it's a year to kind of think in terms of your legacy. Now, some of the most important periods during 2019 about this Jupiter in Sagittarius are going to be right off the bat. In January, we have a friction 45-degree connection between Uranus and Uranus and Neptune. Neptune is kind of loosey-goosey, mysterious, unclear, and Uranus is weird and sudden things, so sudden weird things happening. And Jupiter's going to amplify that, and it makes rough connections to both of them, 1st to the 13th of January. And then it's still kind of in that range when we get the full moon eclipse, January 21st, that very much emphasizes Jupiter, Neptune, particularly. Like the sun is right in between the two of them. And that could be big deception. Or maybe it's going to be the revelation of what has been big deceptions. Neptune also relates a lot to germs that are going around. So flu could be worse this winter than usual. I didn't look at flu trends, but you might want to get your flu shot. We also have in June, same kind of emphasis, but without a full moon. And that would be the 6th and the 16th. That semi-square is spreading between Uranus and Neptune, so it's not as tightly amplified by Jupiter, or not dates that are as close together. And when we get to the fall, we have a 9/21 and a 10/14 date, but I think the real tough part is over by then. We might also see some key events that are affecting global matters when we have a midpoint halfway between Jupiter and Pluto at 0 of Capricorn, one of those season-changing degrees that affect people far and wide. And that's actually coming up on the winter solstice, the 22nd of December in 2018. So the whole winter season is probably going to see some big change in global matters, and maybe also global financial matters. And we may have some legislative changes or rule changes. The Jupiter-Saturn midpoint is at that 0 cap, 22nd of January, right by that eclipse, August 3rd, September 12th. So those are times to keep an eye on. And we're going to run out of time before I could do all my celebrities in detail about who's born with Jupiter and Sagittarius. But I'll just read the list. Queen Elizabeth I, the one from Renaissance times, pre-Renaissance, well, anyway, the first Queen Elizabeth. She was known all around the world, and there wasn't a lot of people back then known around the world. The current Elizabeth's son, Prince Charles, who may become king someday, we'll see. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, who was married to Prince Charles's brother Albert, divorced now, was just mother of the bride this past August. Hillary Clinton, a Secretary of State, worked with things all around the world, worked with legislative things. Tracy Ullman, comedian. Kathy Bates, actress and comedian. And look up Allison Janney. She's the one that's been on West Wing and The Mom in Juno and I, Tonya, for which she won a bunch of awards. She's everything like Jupiter and Sag, even though she's a Scorpio sun sign. She's tall, she's educated, she's humorous, she's witty, she's very freedom-oriented, never married, no kids, successful in her film career. Actress in all kinds of things, successful in her field, TV, film, live stage, voiceovers, tons of awards. And when she had 2017 and won her most awards for that, I, Tonya, big emphasis from Venus to her natal Jupiter and from Jupiter to her Neptune, which means acting. So Jupiter and Sagittarius, it's a great year for you to do something new, big, exciting, in one of the areas that I told you about that's good for your sign. So let's meet again soon and talk on another episode of